The reason why I gave meditation as an example is to say that there is this natural tendency for life, just like any living thing, like it's always sort of like dynamic and moving. And if you try to bring it back, like if you try to meditate, like it's hard. And that's why it's hard, is because there is this natural like flow that's always sort of happening. And Nietzsche noticed these people, he called them ascetics. Basically, like Jesus Christ would be an example of an ascetic. Like there, some guy who like goes and meditates in the forest for 40 years would be an ascetic, right? And he sort of like looks at them and he's like kind of wondering like what's up with that, like why would somebody want to do that to themselves? Like we live in this world where you could do like anything, you could do anything, right? Like you could become Alexander the Great, like you could have lots of sex and do lots of drugs, like you could be like a real like strict conservative type person, like you could do anything. But these people intentionally choose to not do, like, and that's like the defining characteristic of asceticism. And that's what meditation is. It's not thinking, it's bringing things back. And then if you're an ascetic, like they'll do things for the sake of testing their discipline. Like for example, in India, there's this city called Varanasi that has a lot of spiritual like heritage to it. And I remember watching this documentary, and there was this one guy who had his arm over his head, and he had it there for like 30 years or something like that, right? And so there's
For real?
basically,
For real? For real?
yeah, for real, meaning like he like his arm was like all knurled up and shit because it was just like it was just limp, like his hand was like this, and it was like kind of messed up because you could tell he hadn't moved it for like a long time, and yeah, it was just all limp. Or if you consider like some yoga poses, like the flexibility, like when you really like curl yourself up into a pretzel, and I'm not talking necessarily about just like the average thing that like a soccer mom will do, but I'm talking about like when you really take it to an extreme, right? And like essentially, like what are you doing? Like you're numbing yourself. Like for example, there's yoga poses where you put pressure on like basically on your taint, and if you put enough pressure
What that
there,
is? What is that?
oh, that's like it's in between your balls and your anus, right?
Okay.
Yeah. You like the way you sit, like you put a bunch of pressure like on there with your heels, right? Like you sit with your feet under you, right? And
Okay.
you put a bunch of pressure there, and then what that does is it like cuts off blood flow to your junk, so you don't get like tempted by sexual thoughts.
What the fuck?
Yeah. So the point is like, well, that's the thing, right? Like you're listening to that and you're going, "What the fuck?" And that's how Nietzsche felt. He's like, "Man, what the fuck? Like, why are these people doing things that are so blatantly just like, what's the point of this, right?" And yeah, his conclusion was that like what they're doing is they're willing nothingness, and that's what happens is like humanity or just like life in general needs some purpose so bad that people who don't want to like commit to anything, they'll even will nothingness because they can't help but will something. And that's what the will to power is about. It's about the idea that like you always need some aim. Like you can never just be satisfied with like what you've got. Like life in its very essence is something dynamic and changing, and you can't ever just like sit still. And if you try to sit still, that's what happens. You become an ascetic, and it's hard to do that too. And so it's like there's something inherent to life about willing, and that's what the will to power is.